On a chilly July morning in 1535, a solitary executioner stood atop Tower Hill, waiting for England's former Lord Chancellor. Sir Thomas More was condemned to die, but rumors whispered that King Henry VIII had ordered his destruction long before the trial even began. Was this a lawful execution, or a state-sponsored murder hidden behind Tudor law? The truth begins in darkness. Years before his tragic demise, Thomas More was the most trusted advisor in the realm. A revered humanist scholar and brilliant lawyer, he captivated the young King Henry with his intellect. Together, they governed a flourishing kingdom, enjoying intellectual debates and royal banquets. Yet beneath this brilliant courtly outer veneer, dangerous ideological fractures were already forming quietly in secret. The fracture erupted when King Henry grew desperate for a male heir. Frustrated by Pope Clement VII's refusal to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry sought to bend the church to his will. While other courtiers quickly succumbed to royal pressure, Sir Thomas More remained steadfastly silent, aware that defying the king meant instant ruin. Henry declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, severing all ties with Rome. This monumental shift transformed English society overnight, turning former allies into bitter enemies. The king demanded an oath of allegiance from every prominent nobleman, forcing a brutal choice between spiritual salvation and political survival. More knew his silent resistance could not endure forever. In 1532, More resigned his position as Lord Chancellor, surrendering wealth, influence, and royal favor. He retired to his quiet estate in Chelsea, hoping obscurity would protect his family. But Henry viewed his silence not as humility, but as treasonous defiance. The king required absolute obedience, and More's quiet defiance echoed louder than open rebellion. In April 1534, the trap snapped shut. Refusing to swear the oath of succession, More was arrested and marched into the dreaded Tower of London. Imprisoned in the damp stone bell tower, he was stripped of books and writing materials. Cold, isolated, and malnourished, his body deteriorated, yet his stubborn moral conviction remained entirely unshaken inside. Thomas Cromwell, the king's ruthless chief minister, orchestrated relentless interrogations inside the fortress walls. Cromwell desperately needed a public confession or a clear statement of treason to justify an execution. Yet More skillfully used his legal genius to evade every verbal trap, maintaining total silence. Frustration grew in the royal court as time rapidly ran out. Dark rumors began circulating through London that Henry wanted More dead without the scandal of a public trial. Mysterious illnesses afflicted high-profile prisoners, leading some historians to suspect covert poisoning attempts. Was the crown trying to silence More discreetly before his defiance inspired wider rebellion across Europe? The shadows surrounding his imprisonment deepened every single day. On July 1st, 1535, More was dragged to Westminster Hall for trial. Weakened by 15 months of imprisonment, he leaned heavily on a staff, yet his mind remained sharp. The trial was a rigged spectacle designed to deliver a predetermined verdict. Yet without explicit evidence of treason, the prosecution struggled to prove any crime whatsoever under English law. The turning point came with the perjured testimony of Richard Rich, the Solicitor General. Rich falsely claimed that More had explicitly denied Parliament's power to make the king head of the church. More passionately refuted the lie, exposing Rich's character, but the political outcome was already sealed. The jury deliberated for less than 15 brief minutes. The court pronounced the sentence for high treason. More was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn. Free from legal constraint at last, More finally spoke his mind, declaring that no temporal monarch could claim supremacy over Christ's church. His bold speech shocked the court, transforming a political execution into a profound stand for religious liberty. King Henry commuted the gruesome sentence to simple beheading, a rare gesture of mercy that was actually a calculated political move. Henry feared that a protracted, brutal execution would provoke outrage across Catholic Europe. By shortening the spectacle, the crown hoped to minimize public martyrdom, but the move only fueled suspicions of a panicked cover-up by the monarchy. July 6th arrived with heavy damp air over London. A fragile, gray-bearded Moor was led out from the Tower under heavy armed guard. Thousands of silent citizens lined the narrow streets, watching in somber awe. Moore maintained his trademark wit, famously asking an officer for help ascending the shaky wooden steps of the scaffold on Tower Hill. On the execution platform, Moore addressed the silent crowd with calm dignity. He declared that he died the king's good servant, but God's first. Blindfolded, he carefully drew his beard aside from the wooden block, remarking that it had committed no treason. A solemn silence fell across the hilltop as the executioner raised his heavy steel blade. With a single swift stroke, the executioner's axe fell, instantly severing the former chancellor's head. The crowd gasped in collective horror as the dark deed was finalized. Henry had eliminated his greatest domestic critic, but the strike reverberated far beyond the borders of England. Instead of silencing dissent, the axe created an immortal martyr for the ages. Following custom, Moore's head was boiled, parboiled, and impaled on a pike atop London Bridge as a stern warning to potential traitors. Passers-by stared in grim silence at the decaying feature. Yet Henry's attempt to intimidate his subjects backfired spectacular, turning the gruesome display into a focal point of quiet veneration and silent pilgrimage for devout citizens. Under cover of darkness, Moore's courageous daughter, Margaret Roper, bribed the bridge keeper to retrieve her father's severed head before it was thrown into the river. She preserved it carefully in spices inside a lead box for the rest of her life. This daring act preserved the ultimate relic of resistance against Henry's tyrannical royal decree. News of the execution sent shockwaves through European royal courts. Emperor Charles V declared he would rather have lost his best city than such a counselor. Pope Paul III threatened Henry with excommunication. Henry found himself diplomatically isolated, branded across Europe not as a reforming monarch, but as a ruthless and bloodthirsty tyrant. Modern historians continue to debate whether Henry's target was truly treason or personal vengeance. Some scholars suggest Henry was deeply unsettled by Moore's moral authority, viewing his refusal to compromise as a direct challenge to his absolute monarchy. Was the legal trial merely a sham cover for what amounted to a cold, calculated royal assassination? Moore's death marked the beginning of Henry's descent into unchecked paranoia and violence. In the years following 1535, dozens of nobles, ministers, and even Henry's own wives met similar tragic fates on the scaffold. The elimination of Moore removed the last moral compass within the royal government, leaving Henry surrounded only by sycophants and flatterers. The clash between Thomas More and Henry VIII was fundamentally a battle between state authority and personal conscience. More proved that an individual could stand firm against the overwhelming power of an absolute ruler. His refusal to betray his inner beliefs redefined the limits of royal power, setting a legal precedent that echoes through history. Uncovering forgotten state papers from the Tudor era reveals the intense government paranoia surrounding Moore's final months. Intercepted letters show that officials carefully monitored public reaction, terrified of popular uprising. The Crown went to extraordinary lengths to control the narrative, scrubbing court records to obscure the illegitimacy of the legal process used against him. So was Sir Thomas More murdered by King Henry VIII? Legally, it was a court conviction for treason, but ethically and historically, it was a state-sanctioned execution designed to eliminate a political opponent. Henry utilized the machinery of the law to commit judicial murder, ensuring that no man's conscience could stand above the king's divine will. 5 centuries later, Sir Thomas More remains an enduring symbol of integrity against tyranny, canonized as a saint and remembered worldwide as a man for all seasons. King Henry achieved his immediate political goal, but lost the battle for history. While Henry's reign is defined by tyranny, More's legacy shines as an unyielding beacon of conscience.